you can draw this in Procreate. During this tutorial, we are going to create this iris in an eye. And it's really not as hard as it looks. I will provide you with the eye and together we will create the iris. We'll start off by creating a simple circle. We'll add some shadow, a pupil, and then we'll start adding that iris-like texture and lighting. You can download the file we'll be using through a link in the description, just like the color palette that I have provided, so you can use the same colors as I'm using, but of course you can use any color you like for your iris. Oh, and don't forget, once you have your finished result, go ahead and share it online. If you're sharing it on Instagram, then be sure to tag me in the image, not just in the description. And then I will be able to find your work and perhaps we'll see it in the next video. Now let's get started. First of all, let's grab a brush. We are going to use the round brush, which you can find under painting. And for the color, we are going to use this fourth color in, well, the only row of colors that we have. The opacity of the brush is at 100% and the size is set to 25%. And now we are going to draw a circle. So just draw a circle onto the eye and hold your pen in place to make it snap to the quick shape, and then hold one finger on the screen to make it turn into a perfectly round circle. Then let go and drag the color into your circle to fill it. Now we can go to the move tool, that's the little arrow up here. Make sure that you have it set to uniform. And now you can make it bigger or smaller and move it around until we have found the correct placement. Now make sure that you don't create a small iris like this and center it in your eye. Usually when you look at an eye, the top part of the iris will be covered by the upper eyelid. And you will be able to see a small strip of white of the eye on the lower side. It's just barely touching that lower eyelid. Let's make it a little bit bigger and place it in the center. So let's go for a placement around here. Now the eye is looking straight at us. The top eyelid is covering that top part of the iris nicely and it's barely touching this lower eyelid. So this is perfect. Then just tap the arrow up here. Now the outline of an iris isn't exactly super crisp. When you look at an eyeball, you'll see that the white of the eye and the iris, they have this soft transition. So to mimic that, we are going to use a Gaussian blur on this layer. Just go to the magic wand, then tap Gaussian blur and use your finger or your pen to slide to the right and set your blur to 8%. Now we'll go to the layer menu, the two little squares, and you'll see that we started on the start here layer. And you can see that the bottom and the top layers, they are locked. They have this little lock, so you won't be able to paint on there. That's just to stay safe. So now we have that first layer with the base of the iris, just a circle. Now let's tap the plus for a new layer. And then we'll tap this new layer and set it to clipping mask. That way, whatever we paint, it'll only show up on our iris shape. Now we'll set this layer to multiply. You can do that by tapping the N and then scrolling up to multiply. And multiply is perfect when you want to create shadows. Now for our brush, we are going to go to the airbrushing brushes and use the medium brush. Now let's set the opacity to 70% and we'll set the size to 8%. And for the color, let's grab a darker color. Let's grab this fifth color. And first of all, we'll go around the edges of the iris. They are usually a bit darker than the rest. So we'll just go along the edge. And we'll also add a shadow at the top. The light is usually coming from above and this upper eyelid will cast a shadow on the eyeball. So up here, there will be shadow. Let's make multiple strokes, adding the shadow here, using that same curve as that upper eyelid. So don't make a straight line like this because that upper eyelid, it's curved. So the shadow will be curved as well. Now let's make it a bit more soft. We can go to the magic wand and use Gaussian blur and slide to the right to make this a nice, soft, Transition, let's go for 23%. And now let's go ahead and add the pupil. Let's do that on a layer underneath here. So first tap the Start Here layer and then tap the plus for a new one. And then for the color, we'll grab this last color over here, the 6th color. And then for the brush, we can go back to that round brush under painting. And now we are going to make a smaller circle. So hold your pen in place to make it snap to the quick shape. And then tap one finger on the screen to make it snap to a perfectly round circle, because pupils are round. They aren't ovals, they are round, so make sure that it's perfectly round and drag in the color to fill it. Now let's also make sure that our pupil is in the center of the iris. Let's go to the Move tool by tapping the arrow. You know that a pupil, it's not over here. That looks really derpy. It's not over here either. It really should be in the center of the iris. Now to make sure that our pupil is in the center of the iris, let's go to Snapping and turn on Snapping. And then when you move that pupil around, you'll see these lines, and you need to find the blue lines in the center. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to find them, but here we have it. That's the center of the iris. Then tap the arrow again to get out of here. It's already starting to look pretty good, but let's add some texture to the iris to really make it look like a realistic iris. Let's do it on a new layer underneath our pupil layer. So first tap Start Here again and then tap the plus for a new layer. And let's go grab a different brush. Let's go to the painting brushes. We are already there, and let's use the old brush. And for the color, let's grab the 3rd color. Now the opacity of the brush is at 100% and the size is at 10%. And now let's just go ahead and add some texture. Now make sure that you go from the outside to the center. So don't go like crisscross, but make sure that you make these lines from the outside to the center or from the center to the outside. But think of it as rays of sun going in all directions. And you can see that here at the top we have that multiply layer on top. So here we have that shadow. You will continue seeing that shadow. We're not painting on top of it, but underneath it. You can see that you get a nice looking texture this way fairly easily. We can also add some darker color. Let's just grab this 5th color and let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go for 4%. And from the outside to the inside, not too close to the center, let's just add a few of these darker lines. Just make sure that you go in that same direction, so not like this. That would be weird. From the outside to the center point, or from the center point to the outside. If you want to learn how to create an entire realistic looking eye, then you might want to check out my Patreon page. There you will find over 100 Procreate tutorials, including tutorials about painting realistic looking eyes. Now let's also switch to a lighter color, that 2nd color, and let's go ahead and add some lighter lines. Just creating some nice texture here. Let's make the brush bigger again. Go for 10%. Just a few light strokes. So that we have this texture nicely layered on top of each other. And once you have a basic texture, let's go to the Smudge tool. That's the little finger up here. And we are going to use a brush in the painting section. And that's the Jagged Brush. Now the opacity of this brush is at 100%, and let's set the size to 6%. And let's just go over these areas and smudge them just a little bit, going in that same direction as we just did. You can make it a little bit softer. Just don't go over the top, just a little bit. And now that we have this texture, let's move on to the pupil layer, layer 5. Let's go back to the smudge tool with the jagged brush, and let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's go to 2%. And just like the iris doesn't have a crisp edge, the pupil doesn't have a crisp edge either. It is actually like a round muscle that can contract and expand. And you will see these little like indents, little lines going to the outside. And to create those, we are going to use the smudge tool. And to save us some time, we are also going to use the symmetry tool. You need to go to the wrench, then to canvas, and then turn on the drawing guide, and then go to edit drawing guide. Then make sure that it's set to symmetry. And you can move your symmetry guide, you can move it around, actually zoom in a little bit, and make sure that it's centered in your pupil. Just try to be as precise as possible. Now over here you have the color, you can change that if you like. You can turn up the opacity of the lines. Not really necessary, but you can do it. And then tap done. Now let's go along the edges, just gently, and pull this outward so that we don't have that crisp edge anymore for our pupil. Once you have something like this, turn off that drawing guide. You need to do that in the layer menu. You can see that the layer is assisted right now, which means that that symmetry is going on. So tap the layer, turn off drawing assist. And if you also want to get rid of those lines, you need to go to the wrench and turn off the drawing guide. Now let's go over the edges again to get a little bit more variety. Because sometimes you might see it when you have used that symmetry tool, it'll look too symmetrical. And you can also go from the outside to the inside if you have gone too far. You can play around pushing the colors and pushing that thumbs up button while you're at it. Just make sure that your pupil will remain a circle. Otherwise, it'll start looking weird. Something like this is fine. Let's add a little bit more texture to the iris. So let's go back to layer 6 over here and then tap the plus for a new layer. I want to add some light here, so let's change the layer blending mode. We'll tap the N and set it to screen. Screen is great for making highlights. Now for the color, let's just stick with this color. And for the brush, we will go to the inking brushes and use the dry ink brush. The opacity of this brush is at 100%, and let's set the size to 25%. And now let's add some extra texture, some little wobbly lines. It's a bit like as if it's a heartbeat. We'll make some lines extend, and we'll make some shorter. Just follow those lines that go outwards. And make a bit of a random shape. You can also add some little lines. Just a little extra touch to that iris-like texture. And here at this point, you can really go all out with all the detail. You could also look up some reference images or check your own iris to find some inspiration. Perhaps you would like to use other colors. So if you're using another color, if you are creating a green eye, for example, then you can follow the same steps. And at this stage, you can just use a lighter green to create the same effect. Just add some lighter, thin lines as well. Something like this will be fine. I feel like it's a little bit too light, so we can just lower the opacity of this layer by going to the layer menu and then tapping the S and sliding to the left to, let's say, 60%. Now finally, we need a bright highlight on our eye. Let's do that on top of the other layer. So first tap this layer forward and tap the plus. And now for the brush, we are going to use the monoline brush under calligraphy. And for the color, we'll grab this first color. And now let's draw a circle. Hold your pen in place to make it snap to the quick shape again, and tap one finger on the screen to make it snap to a perfectly round circle. Then drag in the color to fill it. And then move it around by using the move tool. And place it a little bit in the center like this. Next, we'll be using a layer mask. A layer mask is handy when you want to remove parts of a layer, but you don't want to destroy those parts. So it's not like erasing, but at the same time, it is a bit like erasing. But this is the type of erasing that you can undo if you like. So to add a mask, you need to tap the layer and then tap mask. And now you'll see a white layer mask attached to our light circle. And since it's white, everything will be visible, but once we start drawing on it with black, we'll start masking things or erasing things. But if you have erased something and you want it to show up again, then you can just paint on it with white again to make it visible again. And that's what makes layer masks so super handy. Now let's first just use that monoline brush. Let's set it to black. Well, it's already set to black. If you need to grab black, then you can double tap here at the bottom. So with black, let's remove some parts. Now make sure that you have the opacity of your brush set to 100%, otherwise it'll be transparent. And let's set the size of the brush to 25%. Now first, let's remove the top part of our very big highlight here. And we need to remove that top part because right underneath that upper eyelid, the light won't reach. So that's in shadow anyway. So let's remove that while we follow that curve of that upper eyelid. I'm moving around to close that shape so then you can fill that area. If everything is disappearing, then you haven't closed the shape. Let's do that again. Let's start here this time. Make a bit of a wobbly line going up, then a curved line to this area. Then let's go up, swoop around to close the shape, and then drag in the color. Now this is just a bit of a random light reflection shape. Now let's fade it a little bit by grabbing a different brush. Let's go to the airbrushing brushes and use the soft brush. Now the opacity of this brush is at 60%, and let's set the size to 25%. And now let's gradually remove that lower part just a little bit over here as well. Now a soft brush like this is great for making these soft transitions. Let's make this fade even more here at the bottom, over here as well. I want the highlight to be the brightest over here. So something like this. Now since we have these lashes up here, this highlight wouldn't look like this because these lashes, they are also blocking the light. Just like that upper eyelid is, these lashes, they create like shadows, or they're blocking that light, creating a pattern on that highlight. So let's add that to our eye. We can use this same layer mask to do that, but we will use a different brush. Let's go to the calligraphy brushes and use the script brush. And the script brush, with that brush, the harder you press, the thicker your line will become. And if you press lightly, it'll become thin. But of course that only works if you are using a pressure sensitive pen like the Apple Pencil. Now let's set the opacity of the brush to 100% and let's set the size to 10%. And now we will need to mirror these lashes and this reflection. So something like this. You don't have to be super precise, but try to mirror them. Now usually when I create lashes, I don't use the script brush, but I like using my special lashes brush. You can actually find it in my ultimate pack for portrait painting, which has a lot of other awesome portrait painting brushes in there as well. I'll try to make these swooping motions and mirror those lashes at the top. Just don't worry if they are not exactly the same. But creating these lashes in the reflection, it'll really add to the realism of your iris, of this eye. So something like this is actually perfect. You have created a realistic looking iris super easy. Now, like I said, if you want to learn more about Procreate and about painting realism, or if you just want to support this channel and make sure that we keep creating these videos, then check out my Patreon page. But you are also a great help if you just hit that thumbs up button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to share your work. I would like to thank you for watching, and I will see you next time for the next tutorial.